Welcome to Whispers Through Time. Today we'll tell you the story of a stonemason from ancient Rome and his drama with his son. Chapter 1, Born into Stone, First-Person Narrative. My name is Matteo di Rossi, and I was born in the shadow of broken giants. That is what Rome is, if you truly see it, not the city of emperors and glory that men speak of in stories, but a place where the past lies in pieces beneath your feet. Great columns, cracked and fallen. Arches that lead nowhere. Stones older than memory, worn smooth by time and weather and the passing of countless lives. And yet we build again. We always build again. I was born in a small house near the edge of the city, where the streets turn from stone to dirt and the air carries more dust than perfume. My earliest memories are not of toys or laughter, but of sound. The steady, echoing strike of iron on stone. My father's hammer. It was a rhythm that filled my childhood. Morning to dusk. Day after day. Even now, as I sit in silence, I can still hear it, like a heartbeat that never truly left me. He was a mason, as his father had been before him. And his father before that. In my family, we did not speak of choosing a path in life. There were no questions of what will you become. You already were. My grandfather, though I barely remember him, was said to have worked on roads that stretched far beyond Rome, roads laid on the bones of the old empire. My father would speak of him with a kind of quiet respect, the kind men reserve for those who endured much and spoke little. He understood stone, my father once told me. Not just how to shape it but how to listen to it. I did not understand those words then. I do now. As a child, I followed my father everywhere. To the workshops. To the half-built walls. To the scaffolding that seemed to scrape the sky itself. The men that were like figures carved from the same material they worked, hard, worn, covered in dust that settled into every crease of their skin. They spoke little, and when they did, their voices were rough, as if shaped by the same tools they held. I remember watching them lift stones that seemed too heavy for any man. Watching them carve, measure, set each piece with a precision that felt almost sacred. To them, this was not just labor. It was order. My first lesson came earlier than I expected. I could not have been more than 7 years old when my father placed a small hammer into my hand. It was worn, the grip smooth from years of use. Hold it properly, he said. I remember the weight of it. Heavier than it looked. Awkward in my small hands. He guided me, adjusting my grip, correcting my stance. Then he pointed to a piece of stone. Strike. I hesitated. Not out of fear but uncertainty. The stone did not look like something that could be changed. It looked permanent. Unmoving. Unbreakable. Strike, he said again, more firmly. So I did. The sound rang out, sharp, sudden, alive. And though the mark I made was small, barely a scratch, something shifted inside me. From that day on, I was no longer just watching. I was learning. Slowly. Painfully, at times. Stone is not forgiving. Strike it wrong, and it resists. Push too hard, and it cracks where it should not. Measure poorly, and the entire structure suffers. There is no room for carelessness. Every action carries consequence. My father was not a cruel man, but he was not gentle either. When I made mistakes, he did not comfort me. He corrected me. Again and again, until my hands understood what my mind could not. Feel it, he would say. Do not fight the stone. It is older than you. Stronger than you. You must learn to work with it. At the time, I thought he was speaking only of the material. But he was not. Rome itself became my teacher. I grew up among ruins that whispered of a past I could not fully grasp. Great structures, half destroyed, still standing with a kind of quiet defiance. Walls that had seen centuries. Foundations that refused to sink. And beside them, our work. New walls. New buildings. Rising slowly. Piece by piece. We were not like the men who came before us. We did not build empires. But we built what remained. What endured. There is a certain pride in that. Not loud pride, not the kind nobles boast of. But something quieter. Deeper. The knowledge that long after you are gone something you touched will still stand. That your hands shaped something the world could not easily erase. By the time I reached my youth, my hands had changed. Calloused. Strong. Scarred in places. They no longer belonged to a child. They belonged to a builder. I no longer needed my father's guidance for every strike. I could measure by eye. Judge weight by instinct. Feel when a stone would hold, and when it would fail. And though he rarely spoke praise, there were moments. Small ones. A nod. A pause. A task given without instruction. That was enough. One evening, as the sun sank behind the broken arches of old Rome, casting long shadows across the ground, my father stood beside me in silence. We had spent the day repairing part of a wall, nothing grand, nothing that would be remembered. Just work. Necessary work. He looked at the structure for a long time. Then at me. You understand now, he said. It was not a question. I followed his gaze, to the stones, set firmly in place. To the lines we had shaped. To the weight they carried. Yes, I said. And I did. Not just the work. But the life. I did not choose this path. I did not dream of it as a boy. But it was given to me, as it had been given to those before me. Passed down not in words, but in hands. In tools. In silence. I am a builder of Rome. Not of its past, but of what still stands. And what will stand after I am gone. Chapter 2, Raising a Monument. There are walls you build and there are walls that build you. The project that changed my life began not with ceremony, but with dust. Always dust. Word reached us through that a great commission had been approved, funded by the church, overseen by men who wore fine robes but had never lifted a stone in their lives. A new basilica. Not small. Not modest. But something meant to stand for generations. A house of God, they said. A symbol of faith. To us, it was something else: work. Survival. Burden. Purpose. The site lay not far from the heart of Rome, where old ruins had been cleared just enough to make space for something new. Broken marble from ancient structures still lay scattered around, as if the past itself refused to leave. We built atop it anyway. We always do. The first day, I stood among more men than I had ever seen gathered for a single task. Hundreds. Stonecutters. Laborers. Carriers. Scaffold builders. Mortar mixers. Overseers. Architects who carried scrolls and spoke in measurements most of us could not read, but had to obey. Each man a piece of something larger. Each man replaceable. The work began before sunrise. It always did. Torches still burned when we arrived, casting long shadows against half-formed walls. The air was cold, damp, and thick with the smell of lime and wet stone. Orders were shouted. Names called. Tasks assigned. There was no confusion. Only motion. Stone does not appear where it is needed. It must be taken. From quarries beyond the city, massive blocks were cut and hauled, dragged across earth and rowed by oxen and men alike. Some arrived cracked. Some arrived late. Some never arrived at all. Every delay rippled through the work like a fracture through stone. We adapted. We always had to. I was assigned to the rising walls of the nave. Not the foundation, that had already been laid by men who began the work before me. And not the highest points either. Not yet. But high enough to matter. High enough to fall. Scaffolding wrapped the structure like a skeleton. Wooden beams tied together with rope, creaking under weight, swaying ever so slightly with movement and wind. We climbed it daily, carrying tools, stone, and sometimes fear. You learn quickly not to look down. The first time I saw a man fall, I did not understand what I was seeing. One moment he was there, lifting, adjusting, working. The next, gone. A sound followed. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. Work stopped for a moment. Only a moment. Then resumed. Because stopping does not rebuild what is lost. And there is always more to be done. We worked in teams, though no one called them that. You learned who you could trust. Who measured carefully. Who rushed. Who cut corners. Because in this work, another man's mistake becomes your burden. And sometimes your end. The architects would walk among us, pointing, correcting, arguing among themselves in words that meant little to us. But their decisions shaped everything. A change in angle. A shift in support. A recalculation of weight. What seemed small on parchment became enormous in stone. And we were the ones who had to make it real. There were days when nothing fit. When stones refused to align. When entire sections had to be undone and rebuilt. Hours of labor erased. Men grew frustrated. Tempers rose. Arguments broke out. Because wasted effort is a cruelty few can endure quietly. And then there were the injuries. Hands crushed. Fingers lost. Bones broken under shifting weight. We learned to work around pain. To wrap wounds and continue. Because absence meant replacement. And replacement meant hunger. Still there were moments. Rare, but real. When everything aligned. When a stone slid perfectly into place, not forced, not hammered, but fitting as if it had always belonged there. In those moments, the noise faded. The shouting, the strain, the exhaustion, all of it quieted. And for a brief second there was something close to peace. Weeks became months. Months became years. The structure rose slowly, stubbornly, like something alive. Columns took form. Arches stretched overhead. Light began to move differently through the space as the walls climbed higher. We could see it changing. Becoming. But with growth came pressure. The church demanded progress. The overseers demanded speed. Faster, they said. More, they said. As if stone obeyed urgency. As if time could be bent without consequence. One winter, part of the structure failed. A section of wall, improperly supported, poorly timed, collapsed before dawn. No lives were lost. But the damage was severe. Days of silence followed. Not peace, but tension. Blame moved quietly through the site. No one wished to carry it. But someone always does. We rebuilt. Stronger this time. More careful. Because failure teaches in ways no master can. I remember one evening, standing high upon the scaffolding as the sun fell low over the city. From there, Rome looked different. The ruins, the streets, the people moving below like distant shadows. And in the center of it all, what we were building. Not finished. Not perfect. But undeniable. Real. A man beside me, older, worn, his hands as scarred as mine, looked out with me. They will never know our names, he said. I said nothing. Because I knew he was right. They will stand here, he continued, long after we are gone, and they will look at this and think it simply appeared. He paused. But we will know. And that is the truth of it. We were not building for recognition. Not for reward. Not even for those who paid us. We were building because it is what we did. Because stone, once placed, does not forget the hands that shaped it, even if the world does. That basilica was not yet complete. Not even close. But already it had begun to change us. To shape us. To take from us. And give something in return. We were raising a monument. But piece by piece, it was raising us with it. Chapter 3, Bread or Stone. There is a lie that men like to believe. That hard work brings a good life. That if a man gives his strength, his time, his body, he will be rewarded. I believed that once. Not because anyone told me. But because I needed it to be true. We were building something grand. That much could not be denied. Each day, the basilica rose higher, stronger, more complete. Its walls thick with purpose. Its arches reaching toward heaven itself. Men would pass by and stop to look. Some in awe. Some in silence. Some with pride, as if they, too, had a part in it. But when the day ended, we returned not to grandeur, but to hunger. Payment came irregularly. When it came at all. Weeks would pass with promises. Soon, they would say. Funds are delayed. The church must approve. Always a reason. Never bread. I remember one evening in particular. The light had already begun to fade as I walked home, my body heavy from the day's labor. My hands ached, my shoulders burned, and the dust of stone clung to me as it always did. But it was not exhaustion that weighed on me most. It was the thought of what waited at home. Or rather, what did not. My wife, Lucia, stood near the hearth when I entered. There was no fire. That was the first sign. The second was the silence. No sound of cooking. No smell of bread. Only stillness. How much? She asked. She did not greet me. She did not need to. I understood. I always did. I reached into my pouch. Felt the emptiness there before I even opened it. Nothing, I said. The word felt heavier than any stone I had lifted that day. She closed her eyes for a moment. Not in anger. Not even in disappointment. But in something quieter. Something harder. Acceptance. The children were in the corner. Watching. They did not speak. But their eyes did. They had learned, already, how to measure a day not by the sun, but by whether there would be food. That night, we ate little. A thin broth, stretched beyond reason. More water than substance. We drank it slowly. As if time itself could make it more. I lay awake long after they slept. Listening. To their breathing. To the silence of an empty house. To the distant sounds of the city, where somewhere, surely, men were eating well. And I thought. What am I building? A house for God. Walls that will stand for centuries. Stone that will outlive me. And yet. I cannot feed my own children. The thought came to me then, sharper than any chisel. Leave. Find other work. Something that pays. Something that feeds. Because what is pride against hunger? What is legacy against a child's empty stomach? The next morning, I did not rise immediately. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. For the first time in my life, I questioned the stone. Lucia noticed. She always did. "You're not going?" she asked quietly. I did not answer at first. "I could find other work," I said eventually. "Labor. Carrying. Anything that pays regularly." She said nothing. And in her silence, I heard everything. Because she knew. As I did. There are many kinds of work. But not all of them are yours. I went anyway. Back to the basilica. Back to the scaffolding. Back to the stone. The men were already there. Working. As if nothing had changed. As if none of them carried the same thoughts. But I knew better. I saw it in their faces. In the way they moved. In the quiet between words. We all felt it. We all endured it. That day, I worked harder than usual. Not out of loyalty. Not out of discipline. But out of defiance. Against hunger. Against doubt. Against the cruel truth that what we gave was never equal to what we received. And yet, there was something else. Something I could not deny. When I placed a stone that day, perfectly aligned, balanced, strong, I felt it again. That same quiet certainty. That same stillness. That same sense of rightness. It did not fill my stomach. It did not feed my family. But it fed something else. Something deeper. Something I did not yet have words for. That evening, I returned home again. With little. But not nothing. A small piece of bread. Not enough. Never enough. But something. We shared it. As we always did. No one complained. No one spoke of tomorrow. And in that moment, I understood something that would follow me for the rest of my life. A man does not choose between bread and stone. Not truly. Because if he abandons the work that defines him, he may feed his body. But he will starve in another way. So I stayed. I continued. Day after day. Stone after stone. Hunger beside me. Doubt behind me. Purpose ahead of me. Because I was a builder. And whether it would break me. Or define me. I did not yet know. Chapter 4, The Son Who Refused Stone. There is a moment every father waits for. The moment when his son is no longer a child. But not yet a man. A moment where something must be passed on. In my family, that moment was always the same. A tool. A lesson. A path. My son, Luca, reached that age sooner than I was ready for. Or perhaps I had simply grown older, and time felt faster. He was not like me. I saw that early. Where I had been quiet, observant, drawn to the rhythm of work. He was different. His eyes did not follow walls. They followed light. The way it moved across surfaces. The way it changed through the day. He would sit for long stretches, saying nothing, simply watching. At first, I thought it was idleness. A child's distraction. I was wrong. The first time I brought him to the site, I felt something close to pride. Not the loud kind. But something steady. This was how it had always been done. My father had brought me. And now, I brought my son. He walked beside me through the narrow streets, his steps lighter, his gaze wandering over everything. The basilica rose before us as it always did, immense, unfinished, alive with motion. Men shouting. Stone grinding. Wood creaking. Dust rising in the air like breath. This is where you will learn, I told him. He said nothing. Only nodded. But his eyes were not on the walls. They were on the colors. I placed a small tool in his hand. Not unlike the one my father had given me. Worn. Simple. Real. Hold it, I said. He did. Awkwardly. As I had once done. I guided his grip. Corrected his stance. Showed him where to strike. The same words passed down. The same motions. The same expectations. Strike, I told him. He hesitated. Not in the way I had. Not uncertain. But unwilling. Still, he obeyed. The sound rang out. Sharp. Empty. He did not look at the mark he made. He looked at his hand. As if the tool did not belong there. Days passed. Then weeks. I brought him whenever I could. Taught him what I had learned. Measured his progress. Watched him closely. But something was wrong. Not with his hands. Not with his strength. He could learn. He was capable. But there was no connection. No understanding. No hunger for the work. Instead, I began to notice something else. One afternoon, I found him sitting apart from the others. Not working. Not watching. But drawing. With a piece of charcoal, he traced lines along a flat stone. At first, I thought it was meaningless. Childish shapes. Idle distraction. Then I looked closer. He had drawn the arch. Not as we built it. But as he saw it. The curve was precise. The shadow accurate. The way light touched one side and left the other in darkness. He had captured it. Without tools. Without training. Without instruction. I felt something shift inside me. Something I did not yet understand. What is this? I asked. He looked up. For a moment, I saw something I had not seen before. Not hesitation. Not reluctance. But certainty. It's the wall, he said. That is not work, I replied. My voice was sharper than I intended. Work is this, I said, gesturing to the men, the stone, the structure rising around us. This feeds you. This builds something real. He looked back at his drawing. Then at me. This is real, he said quietly. We did not speak for the rest of the day. That night, I sat in silence longer than usual. Lucia noticed. She always did. He doesn't belong to the stone, she said. I frowned. He is my son. She shook her head slightly. No, she said softly. He is himself. I did not like those words. Because I understood them. In the days that followed, the distance between us grew. Not in space. But in understanding. I pushed him harder. Corrected him more. Demanded focus. Demanded effort. Demanded that he become what I believed he must be. And the more I pushed, the more he pulled away. He still came to the site. Still held the tools. Still followed my instructions. But his eyes were never on the stone. They were on the walls. Empty spaces. Waiting. One evening, after a long day, we stood together near the rising structure. The light was fading. Casting long shadows across the unfinished surfaces. He looked up at the walls. Not as I did. Measuring strength. Weight. Alignment. But differently. As if he saw something I could not. "They're empty," he said. "They're not finished," I replied. "No," he said, shaking his head. "They're waiting." "For what?" "For something more." I did not answer. Because I did not understand. But I felt it then. Clearer than ever before. The line between us. I had inherited stone. Passed down through generations. Solid. Unchanging. Certain. But my son. He was something else entirely. He did not see walls as structures. He saw them as beginnings. Chapter 5, A Different Legacy. There are battles a man can win with strength. There are others he wins with skill. And then there are those he must lose to understand. For many days after that evening, I said little to my son. Not out of peace. But resistance. A quiet refusal to accept what I already knew. He still came to the site. Still stood beside me. Still held the tools when I placed them in his hands. But it had become a performance. For me. Not for him. And I saw it. In the way his grip never settled. In the way his strikes lacked intention. In the way his eyes wandered, not from distraction, but from distance. He was not failing. He was elsewhere. I began to notice things I had once ignored. Details that had always been there, but never mattered to me. The painters. They had arrived months before. Quiet men, different from us. Where we were covered in dust and grit. They worked with color. Pigments ground into fine powders. Mixed with oils, with care. Applied slowly. Deliberately. They did not build the walls. But they transformed them. At first, I had no respect for their work. To me, they came after. After the labor. After the structure. After the real work was done. But now. I watched them. I saw how they studied the surface before touching it. How they traced lines with patience. How they stepped back, again and again, adjusting, refining, seeing something beyond what was already there. And I saw my son. Watching them. The way I had once watched the masons. That was when I understood. He was not rejecting the work. He was being called by something else. And I was standing in its way. The realization did not come with relief. It came with weight. Because to accept it meant something I was not ready to face. That my line. My father's line. The line of stone passed through generations. Would end with me. I struggled with that truth. More than I had struggled with hunger. More than I had struggled with failure. Because hunger passes. Failure can be rebuilt. But legacy, once broken, does not return. One afternoon, I approached one of the painters. An older man, his hands steady despite his years. His work was unlike the others. More precise. More alive. He stood before a section of wall, adding depth to a figure I could barely recognize moments before. With each stroke, it became something more. You see something there, I said. He did not turn. I see what could be, he replied. I watched in silence. Then, after a moment. My son, I said, he watches you. This time, the man glanced at me. Only briefly. But it was enough. And? He asked. He does not belong to the stone, I said. The words felt strange. Heavy. But true. The painter nodded once. As if I had told him something he already knew. What do you want from me? He asked. The question caught me. Because I had not yet formed the answer fully. But I knew what it meant. I want him to learn, I said. The painter studied me now. More carefully. And you? He asked. What do you lose? I did not answer immediately. Because the answer was everything. My son, I said finally. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then looked back to the wall. Bring him tomorrow, he said. No ceremony. No agreement written. No promises. Just that. That night, I sat with Lucia in silence. As I had many times before. But this time, the silence was different. He will not be a builder, I said. She looked at me. Not surprised. Not relieved. Just present. I know, she said. I tried, I added. Though I was not sure who I was convincing. Her. Or myself. She reached for my hand. Something she had not done in a long time. You did more than try, she said softly. You saw him. The word stayed with me. The next morning, I walked with my son to the site. As I always had. But this time. I did not carry tools for him. I brought him to the painter. This is my son, I said. The boy stood quietly. But I could feel something in him. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something closer to anticipation. The painter looked at him. Then handed him a piece of charcoal. Show me what you see, he said. My son did not hesitate. And in that moment, I let go. Not of him. Never of him. But of what I thought he should be. I stepped back. Watched. As he began to draw. And for the first time, I saw the wall as he did. Not as something to be built. But as something waiting to become. Chapter 6, What Remains. Time does not ask permission. It does not wait for a man to be ready. It moves, quietly. Steadily. Until one day, you look at your hands and realize they are no longer the hands you remember. Mine tremble now. Not always. But enough. Enough that I feel it when I reach for a tool. Enough that I know, my time with stone is ending. Years have passed. More than I once thought I would see. The basilica stands now. Finished. Whole. Alive in a way I could never have imagined when we first set its foundation. I walk slower these days. Through the same streets. Past the same stones. But everything feels different. Or perhaps, it is I who has changed. The city no longer feels vast. It feels remembered. And the basilica, it calls to me. I return to it often. Not as a worker. Not as a builder. But as something else. A witness. The first time I entered it after its completion, I stopped just inside the doorway. Not from exhaustion. But from something deeper. Light filled the space in a way I had never seen before. Not harsh. Not blinding. But soft. Moving across the walls as if it belonged there. The stone stood strong. Just as we had built it. Each line. Each arch. Each weight-bearing point exactly where it needed to be. I could see my work in it. In the structure. In the strength. In the silence of the walls themselves. But then, I looked closer. And I saw him. Not his face. Not his name. His work. Color stretched across the walls. Figures rising from what had once been empty stone. Scenes alive with motion. Emotion. Meaning. What had once been bare, now spoke. I walked slowly along the interior. my hand brushing lightly against the stone as I passed. Feeling its surface. Its strength. Its memory. And then I found it. A section of wall I knew well. One I had helped raise. Stone by stone. Measured. Set. Secured. Now covered in paint. I stood before it for a long time. The figures there were detailed. Careful. Alive in ways I could not fully understand, but could feel. A man stood beside me. Younger. A visitor, perhaps. "It's beautiful," he said. I nodded. "The artist is said to be one of the finest in Rome," he continued. I said nothing. Because I already knew. I did not need a name. I did not need recognition. I had seen the beginning. I stepped back. Let my eyes take in the whole of it. Stone and color. Structure and life. Together. And in that moment, I understood something I had spent years resisting. I had believed that legacy was something passed down unchanged. From father to son. From hand to hand. But I was wrong. Legacy is not repetition. It is continuation. Not of the same path, but of purpose. I built the walls. He gave them voice. Neither of us could have done the other's work. But together, we had created something neither of us could have built alone. I sat down then. Slowly. Carefully. The noise of the space faded. The voices. The footsteps. The distant echoes. And I allowed myself to rest. Truly rest. For the first time in many years. I thought of my father. Of his hands. Of his lessons. I wondered what he would say. Perhaps he would not understand. Perhaps he would. But I know this, he would see the stone. And he would know it was strong. And that would be enough. As for me, I see more. I see what stands. And what lives within it. And I feel no regret. Only something quieter. Something steadier. Pride. Not because my son followed my path. But because he found his own and still walked beside mine. My hands may fail. My work may one day be forgotten. My name may fade as so many do. But this remains. Stone. Color. Memory. A life built. A life transformed. And a truth I carry with me, now that my time grows short. A man is not measured by whether his son becomes him, but by whether he gives him the freedom to become something more.